morning to those that are listening in East Coast time, elsewhere. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Stearns Practical Business Owner Ideas Series. We are really excited today to have Daniel Herrington with us from Voxel Innovations. And Daniel's the CEO of the company, and I want to take just a moment and just briefly describe the way we met, Daniel, and then I want to give you a chance to tell a little bit about yourself, obviously. So Daniel and I met through some mutual relationships in an investing network, and we started to just connect on general ideas about business, general ideas about entrepreneurialism, and Daniel's idea for his company was so creative and just it's so interesting that we just continued our relationship generally in conversation about how to grow, what things to consider necessarily, and some of my experience in the entrepreneurial space and how I could share that with Daniel. And so we just built a great relationship, and I have been so intrigued, and we have been so excited about the journey, Daniel, that you're on and the company is on, the growth, the change. And I just thought it would be just a great thing for folks to get an opportunity to hear from you directly, talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial journey, the idea itself, how the idea of Voxel Innovations started. Tell a little bit about your background, and then let's talk about a few things like the challenges that you've faced. I use this term lovingly, but the P word, the pivot word, right? Which is you got to learn how to pivot, as a part of your entrepreneurial journey. And then lastly, what do you see for the future for the company, and how are you positioning yourself in what new innovations are you seeing coming for you and the company? So, and I will say, I've got this list. However, we may not stay on the list. So I want everybody in the audience to just kind of understand this is really about a conversation with Daniel. Then the other thing I'd remind everyone is that if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A section below, and we will answer that as a part of the webinar. And so please don't hesitate. Love to answer your questions. So, Daniel, let's just start by hearing from you. Tell us a little about your background. And there are three things here that I'd really like for you to touch on. Your background. Tell us what led you to this idea, and help me with this. I'm going to say pulsed electrochemical machining, but I will lovingly call it PECM because that's easy. And so that's easy for me. And then the last thing for just this part is tell us what that is, right? So help us understand a little bit about that. So anyway.
Yeah, great. Happy to be here. So my background is I was an undergrad at NC State in mechanical engineering. I was also simultaneously a professional race car driver. So I was racing open wheel cars and sports cars any chance I got. And I did that. That was effectively my job after I graduated. I was doing that for a few years until the Great Recession, when it became pretty hard to raise sponsorship dollars, so you can imagine. So I always had this passion for technology and manufacturing and energy technologies and some other things. And I went back to graduate school at Duke University in an engineering management program, which is kind of like an MBA for engineers, 1-year accelerated program, and came out of that really interested to go work on some cutting edge technology. And for me, that opportunity was to work at ARPA-E, which is the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Energy. It's kind of a mouthful, but the basic idea was they funded these high risk, high reward energy technologies in ways that even private industry could not do, right? It's taking the type of risk that government's supposed to take to sort of throw out some new ideas. If they work, they're really game changing. And what became really exciting to me in that role was how important manufacturing was to bring those ideas to light. That if you're working on a new type of magnet technology or some electric powertrain, or you're working on a new gas turbine cycle, often manufacturing underpinned those advances. And in my role there at ARPA-E, fantastic experience surrounded by very smart people. I was the dumbest one in the room. I became excited about doing something myself, right? Not just advising companies and teams on how to commercialize their technology, but trying to do that in a more active role and do it in manufacturing. There's something very appealing about making a physical product at the end of the day, the sort of satisfaction just personally that came from that, but also, it's nice in a business environment that you can sort of really drive something innovative with a physical object at the end, and you can see the results of all your hard work right in front of you. So I left RPE and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I think actually my first idea, I've sort of forgotten about this, is I had this idea, 3D printing was starting to become very popular. And that's when these desktop plastic 3D printers were becoming available. My first idea was to actually 3D scan your face and 3D print a custom fit scuba mask or respirator. And man, if I'd only stuck with that until COVID, I probably would have had a first exit. But
It's been done by now, that's for sure.
yeah. But I didn't know enough to really do that well. And then at some point I ran into a friend of a friend who had a company working in this sort of advanced manufacturing industry around an electrochemical machining process, and saw that this fundamental technology, which this company was using in a fairly niche way, had much broader opportunity, especially in the US. And I became excited about the idea that this electrochemical machining process, this fundamental science that's been around for a long time, had all this opportunity that was sort of an, unmet opportunity here in the US. And I effectively left to go start it myself and start a business in this market ourselves. I didn't see a company or an entity that's really doing that in the US that was trying to take this technology and build new intellectual property and provide a service to the industry. And I thought that if you could do that well, there's all this opportunity for innovation on the technology, and also just a need for someone to provide a service where you can provide parts to these critical industries in aerospace and medical and energy and defense. And that's kind of where the genesis of this idea came about. And yeah, but at the heart of it is you sort of asked about what pulsed electrochemical machining is and that sort of thing. And that technology is fundamentally dissolving metal atom by atom with electricity and chemistry. And the simplest way to think about it is that if you take a shaped tool, it's sort of the inverse of the part you're trying to make, and you locate that shaped tool very close to your workpiece. In between that small gap, as you apply an electrical potential and flow a saltwater solution, you create an electrochemical reaction, and you dissolve the metal off the workpiece and effectively copy the shape of your tool into the workpiece. And it has all these benefits in terms of surface quality and repeatability and performance, the fundamental principles behind the technology. And what was clear to me then as it is now, and even more so now, is that technology has important benefits for all these industries, and we keep finding them. These new companies come to us with new problems where our technology can be a solution. And so that's maybe one of the most exciting things. It's built confidence in myself when things are not going well, that we're still on the right track, that there is still a need for what we're doing, a real demand for our service.
You and I have had this conversation in the past about the industry itself. One of the things that I have found so fascinating, and again, it gets back to your early perspective, is the lack of competition in the business. Now, I don't mean people that want to try and do it. I mean true competition. And there are some things that you have done which I think are just extremely competitively advantageous to you, right? So maybe just touch on a couple of those things that you have done at a high level. We'll get into some more of the little details in a minute, but really touch on those things that you have looked at in the industry. And since today's conversation is really about innovation, let's talk about a few of those things that you would say are the hallmarks of Voxel.
Yeah. There's a number of opportunities I saw with the technology where we've been focused, but perhaps the biggest one at a high level was just that the technology is very difficult. It requires expertise in electrochemistry, chemistry, material science, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering. And so already that is a difficult bar for many traditional manufacturing companies to overcome, right? I myself was a mechanical engineer. All the electrochemistry has been self-taught, but I had to read hundreds of research articles on how the technology worked to really understand the science of it. And if you go to many manufacturing companies, that's just a lot to overcome. There's a lot of education required and expertise required to execute on it well. So I think that's one barrier why you don't see many people with this technology, is that is fundamentally difficult because it requires all these disciplines to execute on it well. Another area is that because of this challenge, you find that the market is sort of segmented in a couple ways. You have conventional contract manufacturing shops where they're doing CNC milling and grinding and stamping and forging and all these other processes, which they're fairly well understood, fairly well productionized. And this electrochemical process is kind of a bit of a dark art, right? And so they've, in some cases, have tried to bring that in-house, but they're not experts in the process. They don't design the machines. There's lots that they're missing. And so often they're sort of an incomplete solution to the problem, or can only solve a particular customer application very narrowly. And then the other side of the equation is the companies that build machine tools that run this process or run some version of this process, run an electrochemical machine process. And those are, A, there are not many of them. B, those machines are fairly customized. And C, their model is to sell machines, not sell a part. And so they are sort of want to turn over a machine and let someone else figure out how to make it work correctly and make good parts out of it. So sort of an incomplete solution to the problem. And the opportunity that we saw, and quite honestly backed into because we didn't have any money, was that if we could do all of this ourselves, sort of vertically integrate around the technology, we could solve this problem and deliver these benefits in ways that others couldn't. So, when we started, it was just me at first, and these, to go buy one of these specialty machines from Europe would be $1 million. I didn't have that money, so I built our own. I didn't have a existing machine shop with a big bunch of manufacturing engineers. It was just me. So I was designing their own tooling and our own software and processes. And that's kind of that ethos that we've kept here as a business, is that if we can vertically integrate, do a lot of this ourselves, we can be sort of the easy button. And now, thankfully, it's not just me doing this. It's smart engineers and scientists and operations and technicians that are helping execute on this. But that's really kind of the high-level opportunity we saw. It's kind of like if you're an auto manufacturer, or you went to buy a car and you bought an engine from one place, a chassis from someone else, and a wiring harness from someone else, and said, here you go, you got all the pieces, you figure it out how to make it run and drive and stuff. That's the role we're trying to play, is we do all that, right? So customers come to us and say, I just want the value you get out of this process. We solve all the hard problems and deliver the value, not all these custom little elements of it. And that's what we develop intellectual property around.
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. I know we as a part of our criteria for sharing public company names, I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to anecdotally touch on a couple of things that we've talked about. One of those being a client of yours that sent you one of their machines that they couldn't use, they couldn't make work, and what you did there. And then the other client that we've talked about, where you developed the production and processing for a part that they couldn't get in mass, and you actually work with that client. They are effectively funding the production, and you're doing all the work, and you have an agreement with them. Maybe just touch on those two things very briefly, because I think that they illuminate so well the thinking of the company, your thinking, and your approach to innovation, and touching companies in ways that they cannot solve the problem. So maybe touch on those two.
Yeah. So the first example you talked about was emblematic of how unique this process is. That if you think about it, at some point the value of a company is built in multiple ways. A big component of ours is that technology. And that technology allows you to do something that you just cannot do another way, or maybe you can't do. You could do it, but it'd be 10 times more expensive, which is prohibitive, and then you can't sell the part. So we had a customer that was trying to do a version of our process themselves and bought a machine tool to do it and tried to execute on it, but it just was not their core expertise. They didn't have electrochemists on staff and the expertise necessary. And although they're smart manufacturing engineers, this is just a different animal to them. We were able to take that process that was not running well for them, make it run effectively in our operation by changing many pieces about the technology and how the process ran and how the tooling was built. And it's often never one thing, it's 10 little things or 20 little things to get you there. And we keep finding that the technology is hard, but the value's there. And if we can be the bridge to connect those two pieces, that's where we create value as a business. The second example is another sort of emblematic example for where the technology excels, and that's at volume production. We're not particularly cost effective today at doing one part at a time or two parts at a time, but we need high volume, in this case, millions of parts a year. This process can scale pretty effectively. And there just are not other processes that can enable this thin wall geometry without burrs and some other sort of attributes that they were looking for. But what we did that was unique is instead of going to find a company to build a machine for us and then find an automation integrator to automate the system for us and find a tooling engineer to design the electrodes, we did that all ourselves. And because we did it all ourselves, we were able to move faster through that cycle. And also, as the machine rolls into production, we're able to iterate, develop, refine, improve at a much faster clip than you could have if we were relying on a bunch of subcontractors to do big chunks of this. And so we're able to take a system, and quite honestly, this system went from us doing volumes of very few a year to millions a year almost overnight. It was a big technical challenge from our side, but it was only possible because we understood all the core elements of technology. We were vertically integrated around the technology. We designed our own machine, designed the automation line, designed the tooling, designed the process and software that went with it. And because we could control all those, we had much better control over the final output, the delivery of it, the quality, all those metrics. And so it was a great little win for us, right? When you're small, you're trying to hit singles. You can't really hit home runs yet, but that was a really strong single for us, maybe stretch into a double, where we demonstrate that this process really can scale to these volumes. We demonstrate a way to automate it in a way that's pretty sophisticated and appealing to medical and aerospace customers. And so that was a fun success and a fun win for us as a company.
Yeah, well, I think that's indicative of your journey thus far, and we want the audience to really. I would like the audience to just really hear. We started with you by yourself, and you're not by yourself today. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the growth and the approach that you've taken to that. And I'd like to obviously get to a point where we're talking about what the future looks like, but there are a few things associated with where you are today and some questions I want to ask you related to that. So maybe just kind of a high level of your journey thus far.
Yeah, I mean, so like you said early on, it was just me, but the first hire I made and the second hire were outstanding people. Unfortunately, I moved on for other personal reasons, but those first two hires made me realize how important good people are. Yeah, I don't think I have not been an entrepreneur. This is my first time building a company. You're around smart people, you sort of understand, yeah, good people are valuable, but until you live it, it's adding one more good person is not doubling your capacity. It's 3xing it in many cases. Right. And adding a second good person is now 5xing your capability. When you get really good quality people, the growth and capability doesn't feel like it scales linearly. It can scale exponentially. And so it was one of the first sort of lessons I had as a business. I just got lucky that I hired some good people early on when I didn't know any better. But it forced me to think about how important people can be to growing the business, and that this cannot just be a me company. This needs to be an us company where there's a team of people that's helping us execute. It just would never make it if it was just me doing this. And so part of that's informed how I think about hiring now. I am patient with hiring. I want to make sure we find the right person. It's just not worth getting a warm body in there, especially when you're small. That can be a real drag. Even if it is painful for those 3 months while you're waiting for that right person, it's almost always the right move. You're still not going to get it right. And you're going to have people that are not a good fit, and you've got to deal with that. But that people piece was a big lesson learned for me. The other piece that was a lesson learned is our first customer was a big aerospace company. And I naively thought that as a company of two, I would do this development contract and then boom, they give me an order to make 1 million turbine blades a year or something like that. I didn't know. Yeah. And I was so far from the truth, right? That was a pipe dream, but you wouldn't know unless you did it. And that just forced a recognition of the timeline and how these processes developed, and really a better understanding of our customers and what that involves. And so we started getting a lot better at asking customers about timeline and product launch dates and volumes and prices for these parts and all these other things to help us screen opportunities, because you can waste so much time on an opportunity that is, if it's only worth a little bit of money in the short term, there's a real opportunity cost in that. And that's almost impossible to not take when you're small and you need money, right? You end up taking a lot of those, but you have to. But over time, as long as you understand why you're taking those, that it's because I need cash today because I don't have any, but this is not what we're going to be doing long term, and how can we learn from this? That sort of thought process, thinking about what the future looks like for the business and trying to chart a pathway there, recognizing that what you're doing today is not what you'll be doing in the future, but if you can learn something today that applies to the future, it's not wasted time or effort. And so we try and think about that when we go get government-funded research contracts or take on some new customer application. As long as it's feeding this broader technology strategy or customer strategy, it's worth our time and money to make that sort of time investment in those opportunities.
Yeah. Big picture growth, I think, is one of the things that I have been so intrigued by, the way that you have kept the eye on that. No, I totally agree. And I think, folks listening to this will certainly, and anyone who has had entrepreneurial experience will certainly get the fact that sometimes the shiny object syndrome hits you because you've got to move toward what you think is, the near-term fix. But being able to keep that macro perspective, which I think you have done a great job of, is just, it's just absolutely critical. When I sit still, I mentioned the word, the pivot word, right? Every entrepreneur has to do it. Every entrepreneur on the planet has to pivot at some point in time, not because they're dumb, not because they've got bad ideas, not because they've done anything wrong, but because it's like you have said twice now. You're learning as you're doing, and when you learn and do at the same time, there's always a better way. I mean, I'll say it that way. There's always some better way, right? And so you have to adapt to it. So maybe explain a couple of the moments in the business so far that you've had to make conscious decisions about pivoting. What are you going to do, and where are you going to go? And how many people now in the business?
There are 15.
50.
15, 15.
15. Okay, 50 and 15. Well, when it gets to 50, that'll be quite a shock, I'm sure. But so let's talk about the pivot in the business. What are the things that you think about when you sit still and say, this really had to change and we moved in this direction? What are those areas?
Yeah, so there was one early on that I remember, and that was around how we were where our revenue source was coming from. It's kind of on the heels of that first customer recognition, where we thought the pathway to commercialization was fast and easy, or something naive there, and didn't quite appreciate the timeline involved. And so we took a pivot to basically, we sort of recognize, look, if we're working in these critical industries, we know our process adds value in all these critical spaces: medical, aerospace, defense, energy, whatever. It's, the value's more so there than it is in some low-cost consumer products and some other things. And if you're playing in those markets, people want existence proof, right? They want you to be around for 5 years before they give you an order. And it took us a couple of years to really internalize that and appreciate it. And so we pivoted the business to look at finding a greater portion, or really early on, the majority of our revenue from government-funded research projects, SBIRs and STTR contracts.
Yeah.
And that allowed us to do a couple things. One, you can test out some of your product market fit, because often you're trying to solve a real customer problem on a government related issue, but it has some commercial need as well. So you could start to refine and understand the market. You query customers and sort of tie them into, hey, we're working on a development project that could benefit you one day. Tell us a little bit more about your industry and market and needs. And is it almost an easier way to get into some of these customers and understand the markets. It also allows us to refine the technology. We were able to try things in an R&D environment that we could not have afforded to do commercial work, and really get our feet under us from a technology perspective and understand what the process was and was not capable of, And that really helped refine, when we did go more towards commercial work, what work we should go after. And then the third piece was, quite honestly, it just bought us some time. Like you said, there's some learning that happens that can only happen after the passage of time. There's almost no other way to do it. And having some non-dilutive funding coming into the business, it allows us to learn as an organization how to run a business, not to mention the product market fit and technology pieces I just talked about was essential. And so that was one important pivot for us that I can remember. And the second has been a bit more recent, that basically we had, when you're early on, forever, you're worried about running out of money. That's constantly what keeps you up at night. And so although you're an entrepreneur, so you're generally taking a lot of risk, you also are worried a lot about running out of money. And so you're trying not to get too far over your ski tips, as they say. And so when opportunities that look like they could go to production come to you, you tread carefully, because you could easily outspend yourself trying to get that into production and not have a business anymore. So we were pretty methodical going through that process. But after we got through a few of those, got a couple of those into production, now we're on a bit more of a stable platform. And now we're making some investments in people and facility and equipment to really grow the opportunity or the capability of our company so we can access more business. It's not necessarily a pivot per se, but it is a pivot in that it's a different mindset now. That before you're trying to figure out where do we fit in this ecosystem, where's our real value proposition, who are our customers, and now we're sort of saying we don't know it all, but we know enough to say, all right, now's the time to sort of put the foot on the gas pedal a little bit and open up some opportunity for us and make some investments that make sense. But the last thing I'll say about this around pivots is that I have been fortunate to have really fantastic advisors the whole time I've been running this business. And I think many of the pivots that some entrepreneurs go through, I've had advisors sort of identify those roadblocks or hurdles for me before I got there. So I think that's been essential to our success, that they have lived the life in a manufacturing company, entrepreneurial experience. They sort of understood our customers better than we did. They could help us navigate that landscape and point in the right direction at the right time. And that has been one of the most important things as a business, to have strong advisors that are there to advise you because they care about you and your company, not because they're there to make a buck off you. And it's been essential.
Well, it's so fascinating because I had a conversation at one point in time in my entrepreneurial career with someone who said, what I'd like to do is save you 10 years of learning the hard way. And if I can do that, then you will both be better. And so I totally get that. And I think that's totally right. One of the questions I did want to ask you, and I know that we've had a little bit of conversation about this, but I think it's really interesting when you think about your business model, is the whole concept of co-development, working with a client or customer and developing together, right? And I know you've had a couple of kind of door opening experiences at that. I'm not sure how far that has gone down the road, but I think that's a really important part about the innovation of the company, because not only can you work with multi-billion-dollar companies and learn from them, but you bring something so special to the project, if you will, that it can't be duplicated. So talk for just a second about some of those kind of, and so just talk about, I remember us having a conversation about it, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I don't remember there was a specific light bulb moment around this, but through customer discovery, early on, I just cold called lots of people, mostly engineers at these companies, and tried to understand their problems and what they're trying to solve. And what started to become clear over time was that they just want a solution to their problem. And they are open to any creative solutions to get there, whether it's, some people have the not invented here syndrome, but more often than not, my experience was that they just wanted a solution and they'd go look anywhere to find it. And I started to realize that also as a business, we were way more valuable if we could help co-develop a solution that embodied our technology. We recognized that the technology roadmap, if you could get in early with these companies as they're developing solutions, you could help enable them to make a better product at the end of the day. And that became highly valuable to them, right? In manufacturing, at least, there are some portion of the manufacturing world, which, you design a product and you throw it over the wall to manufacturing, and they figure out how to make it, but they haven't been involved early on in that process to understand how to maximize what manufacturing technology could do to enable that new product. And we saw it a lot actually in 3D printing, that this new technology came about, people were quite enamored with it, and people were rethinking their design process to take advantage of this technology. We basically did the same thing, that we came to them and said, look, we've got this unique technology, unique tool. If you work with us in the design phase, we might be able to help you make a product that's 10% lighter or X% more fuel efficient just by making it out of a different material that you didn't know you could make. So like I lost Kurt here for a second. So just to wrap that up, I think what we learned is that our company is way more valuable if we could get sort of under the balance sheet in the same room as engineers designing their products, that not only would we help them make a better product and become more valuable to them, but then we would actually be part of their written into their processes and procedures. And that sort of reputation tends to spread, that inside those businesses, they're just looking for problem solvers to their solution. And if you can be a partner to them, not just a supplier, but a true partner to them, help them, you got to come in and tell them when you can't do it and when you should go look at some other technology. And we do that. Well, if someone says, can you make this part? I'll tell them no, but you should talk to XYZ company. They use this technology and that would be ideal for it. So we really try and take a partnership approach, even if that means us not selling a job we could do because we know there's a better solution out there that is not us.
Well, there is never a good time for your computer to reboot. So I am 100% apologetic for that. So I apologize. My goodness, man. Sorry about that.
No
I
problem.
just looked up and it was heading in a different direction. So the last thing that we talked about was just the co-development. And I know you finished that idea, I'm assuming, without me on the phone. So I apologize for that. But, I wanted to touch on this quickly. You were a contributor to Dennis's new book, Ninja Entrepreneur. And, Dennis there are 4 characteristics as a part of this book. They are speed, technology, talent, and leadership. And each one of those is a characteristic of what he found as, and I don't want to give the book away, but those are key characteristics for the Ninja Entrepreneur: speed, technology, talent, and leadership. And I really wanted to get your thoughts on which one or how many or all of those characteristics do you think were the most important to get you to this point, and which ones do you think are going to be the most important to take you to where you want to go? Speed, technology, talent, and leadership.
Yeah. Great question. You could pick any of them. I'd say that probably technology has been the guiding light thus far and will play a prominent role going forward. But I say technology because we, as a small company trying to service these larger companies and industries, the deck's not exactly stacked for you. You're seen as risky to them. There's lots of reasons why they should not do business with you. But I think ultimately it's the technology that sort of wins out, right? If you can actually deliver and do what you say you can do, that speaks volumes. They can get over some of the riskiness of a small business and that sort of thing. I think along with that, being an honest broker of the technology, not coming across as a salesperson, but really trying to speak to the technology and what it can do and what it can't do. So there's maybe a portion of leadership there that you're come to them, really talking about the technology fundamentals, not some pipe dream. So I think technology piece has been critical. Being my motorsports background, I never think we're going fast enough. And so I think, if I had to think about what the next phase of our growth looks like and what's going to be important there, I think that all of them are going to be important, but I think that speed is one area we're really focused on, and building that talent pool and leadership pool to execute on that speed. So, what our customers want, they interact with the talent and leadership a little bit, but what they see is the technology and the speed. And so what we're trying to deliver is faster speed. What we need to get there is talent and leadership. And so in particular, right now, what we're trying to focus on is getting the right people in the right roles in this company to allow us to grow. And that's really the right talent. But many of those are leaders. I'm sort of answering all these questions. I'm not singling out one of them, but technology early on, speed
Yeah.
going forward, leadership and talent are essential to get there. And we try, and to my comment earlier, hire slow, so we can find the right talent and leadership. We want to find people that have a bit of an entrepreneurial mindset themselves. Even
Yes.
if they aren't going to start their own business, they're going to sit there and think about, well, why isn't this working? And what's the new solution for it, instead of be told what to do. So that leadership piece is it has to be there in some degree for lots of these people.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, at least from my experience and from talking to folks who have started businesses, I think each one of those has a season where it's the most important, which I think is what you just explained, right? There are moments when, you have to invest yourself completely in having the right leadership because of scale, right? Or speed being, how do you get to opportunity very quickly, right? So generally, I think those things, those are all elements for the building blocks of the business. But I guess the question that I want to just kind of get to now is, where are you going, Daniel? Talk a little bit about the business, what you see for the future. What areas are you really trying to focus the business on? Not just markets, but kind of outcomes, which I think is a really important word, in entrepreneurial space. And that is, if you don't run your business thinking about outcomes versus, products and services, I think that keeps you in that kind of that condensed space. That's one of the things I think you have done exceptionally well, is looking at outcomes and thinking about that. So talk a little bit about your future.
Yeah. So the outcome is a great way to phrase the thought process here. And I think a lot about I talked about earlier, but being a partner to our customers. And if you can be a partner to them, you create enormous opportunity for yourself as a business, right? If you are working with a multinational medical device company and you can solve one of their problems and help them revolutionize how they're making some component, that spreads like wildfire within those companies. And now they come to you for the 10 other things they need help with. And that's how we scale the opportunity side, right? There's always new markets to go after, but there's enormous opportunities within customers that we have. And so we want to make sure that we are truly partnering with them, helping them understand how to take advantage of our capability, design technology that solves their needs. And that creates lots of new business opportunities and drives the technology and the strategy of the business. So that's probably the outcome I think most about is doing that, and doing that at scale. And I basically think that if you can do that partnership model around this technology, the scale comes with it. The opportunity is there for the scale. You have to think intentionally about how to build that scale, but the opportunity is there. And so, we are trying to figure out how to chart a pathway to doing, having hundreds of employees and multiple sites and, doing operations all over the country for key employees and all these different key customers and all these different segments. I think that's what excites me. I see that as an opportunity for technology, that's sort of untapped opportunity, that this can become a more broadly usable technology. But it also, at the end of the day, it's really helping the customers succeed.
Yeah.
I think a lot about that if you can help them make a new product that outsells their competitor or gets some new fuel efficiency or is less invasive in a surgical procedure, you create opportunity for yourself and you create a better world in many cases too. And so those sort of outcomes are really exciting to us as a business.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I mean, and this is one of the reasons that I just know anyone who's listening can appreciate what I'm about to say. Years ago, and I don't know how many years ago now, the book Blue Ocean Strategy came out. A couple of guys from Harvard that just basically decided that they had seen something in their careers and experiences that they identified as the blue ocean area of a business. And one of the most fascinating things about the conversations that you and I have had is that you have so many opportunities to work with customers in areas that they consider blue ocean. And because they're blue ocean for them, they're blue ocean for you. And for anyone who hasn't heard that term before, that's to compete in spaces where there aren't any competitors, to find places in a business where you're competing in areas
where nobody else is. And that's a whole strategy. So I think that's just one of the most fascinating things about the work that you're doing. And that's why I think that as you look at the future and partnering partnering to scale and helping your customers succeed, that's kind of the holy grail of growth. Because if you're doing that as kind of it's your core DNA, then I think that you're managing your statistics is really what is what happens with a company. And so that gets me to one of my last questions, which is talk a little bit about the statistics at Voxel. So statistics being, what have that you could share, of course, the numbers in the company. What are some of the numbers that you think are pretty exciting about? You mentioned one that I think is really exciting, and that is that you went from taking one part that you were going to make, some number of, and now you're making millions of that part, right? So maybe if there are just a few statistics you can throw out about the company that, that folks might find interesting.
Yeah, let me think about that for a second. KPIs, key performance indicators, we have some of those. They're often very hard to have consistently in a small business. You set up a KPI with good intentions, and then you find out 6 months later that was the wrong KPI, and it's not relevant to what you're doing. And so but just the exercise of trying to determine what that key performance indicator is and try and track it is useful in and of itself, right? It forces some recognition of what the metric is that really matters to your business. And, we start to find what some of those things are. For us, they are often around our development timeline, how long it takes us to move a product from one stage of development to the next, how accurate we are quoting that work, how many hours we're spending versus how many we thought we were going to spend. There's some internal cost numbers that we are constantly looking at. The other numbers that we focus a lot on are on the customer side. How big is this opportunity? Is it 1 million parts at $10 a part, or is it 1,000 parts at $1 a part? And those are vastly different. And if you don't find that right early on, first conversation, if you can, it really delays your understanding of what this opportunity is, and you waste time. And so yes. We spend an enormous amount of time thinking about what is the cost that they're after, what is the volume they're after, when does that volume need to occur, and how can we get there? And often we're working backwards. We're trying to think about, if they're trying to get to X dollars a part, how can we get there? What is our machine technology, whatever need to be to get to that number? So we do a lot of glorified back of the envelope math on the number side to try and figure out how we do this at scale. And, for us, like you talked about, that scale can be pretty exciting. We can have thousands of parts a year, but they're very high value, or we've got, applications we're trying to make 1 billion holes a year.
Right.
And that's a big number.
Right. I have to stop because that is just so cool to me. I'm going to make 1 billion holes in a year and turn that into a business. I don't know if anybody else sees it that way or hears it like that, but I hear it like that. I think that is just so fascinating, right?
Yeah.
I know that you do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we have to think about the numbers, right? The number of parts, the dollars per part, the cycle times, those are sort of ground floor for everything. If those don't add up to something that makes sense to the company, we don't move forward and it's not exciting to us. But what we keep seeing is customers come to us and they crack the door open and there's a little bit of volume there. But if you ask the right questions, you find that there's 10x the volume and 10x opportunity just adjacent to it. And so those numbers get us really excited. And like I said, right at the beginning, I've never lost faith that what we're doing is valuable, that the market needs it. But what's maybe the most fun part about my job is you have those conversations with customers, that sort of discovery, and you say, I didn't know this company existed. I had no idea this product existed, never heard of this material before or this feature, but we can do all of it. And right. That's a market that I didn't even envision early on. And that is enormously exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to call this the science of discovery, right? Or the science of qualification, because you are right in the midst of that. And you have to be so, and science being a lot of what you do, but that isn't what I'm really describing here. It's just the discipline and the science of working the discovery process extremely hard up front, because, I think in some cases you are you're kind of crossing the chasm. You're helping early adopters understand how to use the technology that you have. And you're also helping implement it and develop it into something for them. Right. So I think that's fantastic. And remain so excited about your business. It just is totally exciting to me. And I really am intrigued by the whole thing. We're coming up on 12 o'clock. I think the last thing I'd like to ask you is, if there are entrepreneurs listening to this and they are wondering what kind of things you would suggest or recommend, or what kind of thoughts would you have for somebody, what would they be? If somebody's starting, maybe not starting necessarily the way you are, but at least a version of that. Talk a little bit about your recommendations for those entrepreneurs.
Yeah. How long do we have? A couple hours? Yeah. I mean,
well, only 6 minutes, but you can do it all. I promise you.
Yeah. So I'd say one thing is around your support network, and that can be multiple ways, right? I was a sole founder. I think that's kind of a tough way to go. I've had advisors who've done it with, 2 co-founders, so 3 total. That seems like a good number, right? 3 always, you get a good vote one way or another, 2 versus 1, and more. What really happens in the business, especially in an entrepreneurial business, is that you have bad days. And if you can have someone be down and the other person be up and pick you up, that's helpful. For me, I tried to accomplish the same thing with those advisors, people that were really there to help advise me personally because they wanted me to be successful and wanted the business to succeed, but not there to try and figure out how to make a bunch of money off the company. And so that support network is critical, because you will have bad days. You'll have days that you think you're doing nothing right, and having a secondary source to help pull you along or point you in the right direction is really essential. The other is that you're going to run out of money. It's just a question of how bad you do it and when you do it, and that you sort of know it's coming. So although, much of the entrepreneurial world is enamored with these huge venture-backed companies that raise $50-100 million and light it on fire, I think that's not most entrepreneurs' experience, and it was certainly not mine. Having a bit more of a thoughtful way of how you build the business and think about when you actually step on the gas pedal and spend the money, and recognizing what risks are coming along with it. But, I sort of use a factor of pi, that early on, things are going to take 3 times longer and cost 3 times as much as you thought, especially if you haven't done this before. That was certainly the case for me. And if you can try and internalize that as best you can, I think it'll help avoid some of the surprises that come along. But yeah, the running out of money thing is the existential threat that comes with every startup business. And you just need to be really aware of how that's when that could occur, what the numbers are that could get you there, how to keep track of that and get ahead of it. Because it takes a while to solve that, whether you're going to raise some money or do something else to sort of correct the issue. Yeah, so that's maybe the second piece of advice. And the third piece is just a deep understanding of your customers. Spend more time before you've even incorporated the business, before you've done a single thing, to go talk to people and understand what they want. And people are remarkably open about what they need. If you're going to help solve a need for them, they'll tell you about it. They kind of want that. And if you can spend time, I sort of played the card of, hey, I'm new to this. We've got this technology. I don't quite understand it. Help me understand, what your need is. And if we could do X, Y, Z, would that be valuable or not? And that, you'll do that forever as a owner of a business or entrepreneur, but do that a lot early on, because that will help drive those pivots early on when they're less expensive to pivot. It'll help you get to customers more effectively. That's ultimately a business is about getting to customers. And so spend the time early on when it's cheap to do so, to really understand what they need, not hope that you've got it figured out and go make a product and then turns out you were wrong. Really dial in on their needs early on.
Right. Well, first of all, I think that's sage advice. So I know that the audience definitely appreciates it. I know that comes from your entrepreneurial journey and experience, and we appreciate it. And I think in closing, what I'd like to say is, first of all, thank you. It's been awesome to have you. If I seem as though I'm really excited about Voxel, it's because I am. I see just great things, and we are so appreciative that you could join us today. And I think that the points that are so salient here are people, discipline, and I believe that the word partnering is one of the most important words that we've talked about. Partnering with advisors, partnering with clients, partnering with those people that are on your staff. And I think if we've heard anything today, I think those are the great summary points of our conversation. And there may be a time I really would like to have maybe a different discussion or a new discussion with you, and that would be just related to finding opportunity in a brand new technology market. You're learning that now, but I sure would like to have a conversation where we talk more about that, because there are companies and a lot of our business owner clients look at market spaces and say, where do I go now? What do I do now? How do I find the next thing? And so hopefully one day we can have a conversation about that. But otherwise, thank you so much. Totally enjoyed it. We really appreciate it. And you have a fantastic holiday.
Great. Thank you, Kirk. Enjoyed talking to you, and have a great new year.
Thank you.